Hey everyone, welcome to Inside Gaming. Today we're previewing Overwatch 2, and right at the top, let me just address the elephant in the room. I know a lot of you are still a little raw about Blizzard. I get that, I want to respect that, so just don't watch. I hate to be that crude about it. I mean that for real. I want to respect your thing. We're covering it for our own reasons that I'll actually get into at the end of the video because I don't want to delay it for people who just want to hear about the game, but respect your opinions. You can even leave a comment celebrating your brave decision to not watch a YouTube video. Sorry, I'm being dismissive again. Whatever. Just like, I totally get it, it's cool. Leave with our good graces. But we will explain in a little more detail at the end of the video why we're covering Blizzard products. So, with that said, Overwatch 2. I got Zach here with me. I got to play it at BlizzCon. I watched the panels about it to try to just figure out what the heck is going on here, because this is kind of a unique product, or at least it will be when it comes out. Whenever that is, you know, it's Blizzard, so who can say? And they didn't put a date on it. And I think, honestly, the state of the game at BlizzCon and some of the ways they talked about it during the panels implies that it's gonna be a while until we see this game. So we can talk about what we know already. Yeah, it's still Chaos Week here at Inside Gaming. Zach is a big Overwatch fan, and I think probably a little confused about the positioning of Overwatch 2?
Yeah, I'm jumping on this video specifically just so I can pick your brain about some of the things I am still very confused about why they're doing, and even in some cases what this thing even is.
Sure, makes sense. So let's just start with that, kind of describing the way that they're positioning Overwatch 2, which is that all PvP content that they're adding to Overwatch 2, new heroes, new mode, push, which we'll describe in a second, that is coming to Overwatch 1. So essentially, if you bought Overwatch 1, the PvP portion is the games as service portion, and that will continue. So all the Overwatch, air quotes, 2 content will just get lumped into that, which is actually a pretty solid move on Daddy Kaplan's part. I appreciate that. Also, I don't think there's any other way they could have done it, to be frank. So it only makes sense for them to put all their momentum into one basket, and basically, if anyone's interested in Overwatch, there's one place to go, there's one bank of content to buy into, and one progression that all of your stuff goes into, all your skins, your icons, your whatever. So I get that. It's in one way it's like, yeah, they're doing people a solid, but in another way there's no other way they could have done it, which also makes the value proposition of Overwatch 2 very strange. So they're adding PvE content to Overwatch 2, and ostensibly that's really all you're paying theoretically your $60 for when it comes out, whenever it does. And that takes a few forms that they've talked about. I got to play one of the story missions. So yeah, story, that's the big thing that I was super into for a while, and then like the drip feed of lore was just too slow and I just got uninterested. So now they're, I guess, doubling down on that to give us a little more. The story of Overwatch 2 is essentially telling the story of the moment that Winston recalls Overwatch. Null Sector, which are just a bunch of like kind of transformer-looking robots, are attacking Paris. Winston sees that something bad's happening, he needs to recall Overwatch, so he does. Some of the members of Overwatch show up, and then that's the level I played, is like all of the members of Overwatch getting back together and shooting a bunch of robots through Paris.
So to be clear, this is a prequel to, is it being positioned as like a prequel or like a
I don't know.
Kind of?
Because like that implies that there's some temporal setting for the PvP, which I don't think is true. I think the PvP just exists outside time. And then the only like time-rooted things have been the PvE events that they've added.
Right.
Not necessarily Junkenstein, but what was it, Uprising? I think. So to talk about prequels is tough because there have been Overwatch shorts that have happened after the recall, I think. Maybe not. It's so weird to think about it that like the moment that defined the launch of Overwatch, we haven't even really touched on in any actual content. It's just been the shorts.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it so weird is, to talk about it as a prequel, technically true because it's 3 years after the launch of the game, but we never actually got to experience those moments in the game. So the story mode played just like Uprising or any of the other PvE events. There's a locked roster of heroes and 4 players get to pick theirs, basically lock into one of those characters. It opened with an animated cutscene, which was good. It was very well produced. It was in engine, which I always prefer because you get that really high frame rate and high resolution, and you don't see the like weird artifacting of pre-rendered video. Stylistically, it's very like Saturday morning cartoon. Like it's very safe. Everyone's very bright and happy, and the dialogue isn't very good yet. So I want to be clear. Also, preview blah 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 blah. But this game is very far away, and for reasons we'll get to in a minute. But like, there's dialogue of just like, "Hey Tracer, how you doing?" And she's like, "I'd be better without all these killer robots around." It's like,
Oh, Tracer.
the problem that I see on the horizon is that if we're supposed to be buying these PvE events, and a big part of that is supposed to be finally getting the lore, there was very little like interesting banter or lore in the event that I played. Not finished yet, maybe it'll be there later, but there certainly weren't very many interesting character interactions between characters that haven't seen each other for a long time, and typically you would think have a lot to talk about, given that this is Overwatch getting back together. Instead, it's
Right.
just this Avengers style, like, I'm here, now I'm here, now it's me! And like everyone has their shine moment, but no one really says anything interesting, and
So like as far as the way that they're positioning this like kind of campaign story mode, like it's not just like mission 1, like pick any of the available roster of Overwatch characters. It's like there's a finite group of characters that you can play as in that mission.
That's
And
correct.
Presumably each mission will be like structured around those specific characters being able to work there and not like break the mission structure. And I guess like the implication then is that in later missions that available roster will change and like maybe
there's a different PvE mode where you will be able to pick any hero. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
The story mode is very much like you have a specific roster of characters, presumably because like you said, there will be enemies that are tuned around those characters and their abilities.
right. And maybe like
Sorta.
narrative beats that make sense for these characters to be in this setting at this
Exactly.
time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you won't see characters that don't make sense there. I think Kaplan talked a little bit about that, how like at the time Winston recalled Overwatch, like Torbjorn was off doing something else and didn't answer. Like McCree was doing something else and didn't want to throw his, like pun intended, throw his hat in with Overwatch yet. So those characters don't show up for a reason. Like Widowmaker's obviously not there. So there are reasons that certain characters show up. I think it was like Tracer, Ryan, May, and Lucio, because it was in I think the level was in Rio. Yeah, it was in Rio.
Brazil.
Yeah. So there's some flavor thrown on it though, unlike the PvE scene or the PvE elements we've seen so far, is that there's a talent tree now. And that ties into the level of your character, which I'll also touch on in a second. There is a progression system that I'm not super hot on. So since we were all level 1, you get to pick between 2, basically. I played Reinhardt, and his 2 abilities were like Fire Strike puts a dot if you hit people with it. So it does a damage over time for everyone it hits. Which kind of tees up like Fire Strike, typically you want to line up a lot of enemies since it pierces, and if you throw a dot on things, it just makes you kill stuff faster. The other talent that I didn't go with was that every time you hit somebody with your hammer, it increases the speed of his hammer strikes. So
Interesting.
I can see how like you would need to kit out your character for various levels to match the certain types of enemies, the waves of enemies they're throwing at you.
Does it seem like they're going to like allow you to like be changing the like ultimates and the different like moves that each character has, or like the Q that they each have, for each of their characters in the normal multiplayer, will that like be translated to single player? Or is that the implication that like instead of if you're Junkrat, instead of being able to throw down a trap, you can swap that out for some other power that you might have?
I think it's more that like the abilities will function fundamentally the same way. They'll just be a little sauce on it to like increase the DPS or functionality of it.
So like that's what you're saying with Brian, where it's like here's this thing that is not changing any of his specific powers. It's just like altering their effect in some way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they showed another one with Ryan where his Earth Shatter, instead of doing a cone, it did like a 360-degree wave.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, all the abilities seem to fundamentally upgrade some of your abilities and then subtly change the way you might use it, but with the ability to just kill more robots. To that extent, like the level I played was, again, preview, and I hate to say this, but it was kind of boring. It was just a lot of hallways and arenas with just a bunch of robots. Just sit there and let you kill them. Now, there is a thing worth mentioning that when people make demos, they make them very easy, because people don't like to die in video games, and when you're doing a preview, the worst thing you can do is have a journalist die and then write that your game is shitty because he got his feelings hurt. So I don't want to judge it too harshly on that, because certainly some of the PvE events in Overwatch get very hard and require you to know your character very well and be very good at shooting. So I'm trying to give it some leeway, but the monster design didn't really impress me, because it was like, here's a tiny robot that shoots at you, here's a big robot that shoots at you, here's a little flying guy that shoots at you. If they turn the knobs and make it really difficult, then players will have to know their characters better and actually communicate and coordinate.
Right.
But that really wasn't present in the demo I played. And then there was a pretty cool sequence. So it was just a lot of hallways and robots, kill them all. And then Echo came in with the little ship, and they're like, get on the ship, we gotta go take down the drone control ship. And then there was this kind of first person moment where you climb onto the ship, and then you're like watching from the back of the ship as it's flying around. So that was kind of cool, and then it crashes into the robot control ship, and then she's like, everybody out. So there was kind of like a little cutscene in the middle of the level. That was kind of neat. I see some potential there. Then we're back to just running around, smacking robots, like kind of boring banter of like, gosh, robots, oh, this is so tough. And then there's this big boss at the end where you have to fight this core where a little orb pops out. You have to hit it, and then it sinks back in, and you gotta kill another wave, the core pops out again. Video games. Nothing about that encounter felt transcendent or that there was a lot of like design involved. It felt like a kind of middling PvE event that we've already seen from Overwatch, so having that be the like selling the big banner feature doesn't feel like it is worth the money yet. But like I said, really early, and they did talk about some other stuff that I can almost see working out. There's also an item mechanic. So at certain points during the story level, there will be a chest, and then every character can grab an item. There was like a grenade, there was a healing item, there was one that would drop a shield. That's on a cooldown, basically. So again, I can see the light where like you have to coordinate with your team, and certain characters have to take certain items based on their abilities and the roles that they're playing. So there's some depth there, but still, it just feels like that should have been put into Overwatch 1 at some point.
Yeah, I think I'm still struggling to understand the value proposition of beyond just slapping a 2 on this. Like, what is making this an Overwatch 2, a $60 sequel? Like, that is...
Yeah, I can only invent ideas that I didn't see.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of faith in Blizzard's cinematics team. I think StarCraft 2, if you played that, was a really good mark about what they can do with their in-engine cutscenes and their in-engine camera tools. Because there were some great, awesome, badass cutscenes in StarCraft 2 over the 3 games. So if that comes to Overwatch, that could be cool. That goes towards the value proposition. I think if you get some good dialogue between the characters, it's a little less like bland. And like some interesting stuff talking about the characters' relationships and stuff like that. I can only presume that will be in the game eventually. That would help too. But I'm not super into the story content yet. At least the way that they showed it at this BlizzCon, but I assume we're at least a year away. There is another mode that is called Deeply Replayable by
really catchy name for it, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't show hero missions at all because I don't think they're ready to be shown. I don't think they exist yet. But this is, I guess, the mode that's maybe supposed to add a lot more meat, and I can kind of see the light through this. So this is compared to the adventure mode in Diablo. These are missions, PvE missions that will take place on all maps. And basically they will generate objectives for you, and you can choose any hero to go in and play them. The idea being that they want to cut the edge off of taking new heroes into PvP. Of like, you're like, well, Zenyatta seems cool, but I'm really intimidated like taking him into a match. Now you can take him into PvE and dick around with him a little bit, get to know his mechanics, then take him to PvP.
Is it like bot like you're playing just essentially like a bot match, or is it like there's more like structure to it, like objectives, like go, there's a special enemy on Route 66?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So they will generate different objectives. They mentioned a few just off the cuff in the panel. One is that you have to do like a survival mode in Winston's lab on the moon, so that is just kind of like bots running at you, how long you can stay alive. They mentioned also like fighting a big robot on Route 66. So I imagine that playing into the games of service aspect of Overwatch, they'll have a team that's just constantly coming up with like new ideas, creating new like PvE encounters on different maps with different modifiers or something like that to make it challenging. The reason that you would want to do this, one is to learn heroes, two is that in the PvE side of the game, heroes level individually. And as you level a hero, you unlock new talents to pick. So there was like a tier at level 1 where you could pick between 2. For Ryan, it was like the hammer and the fire strike. And then at level 10, and this is just in the demo, there were 2 other ones you could pick from, but either one would fundamentally upgrade your character.
But is that just in PvE?
Yes.
So
just in PvE.
So I guess what is the incentive other than just training to get good with a character to grind a character out in PvE if you really just only care about PvP?
I mean, theoretically, you're having fun. theoretically. But you're right.
That's that old thing that video games were invented for.
Right.
No, I need to be earning something.
So, I mean, you're right, though, that you are pointing to an interesting problem. I can see how, if they do their jobs well, you get together, you get your crew together, everyone picks a hero that is like spec'd out for the particular challenge. If the challenge is hard, then I can kind of see an almost sort of MMO, sort of Destiny vibe, where maybe they put in raids where the fights are mechanically complicated enough and require such coordination that it's fun to just do that, to just tackle that challenge. And then, like you said, for the carrot on the end of the stick, I think that what they could do, pure theorizing here, is that they like lock skins or icons behind doing those hard challenges.
So that's like the bling that you can take into PvP. It's
yeah.
almost kind of making me think of the way that the Crucible works in Destiny, where it's like you can earn all of these amazing things in the PvE modes, but then like when the power level is irrelevant in the Crucible, but like you still get to run around with that awesome pistol that you got.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's, I think, the generous vision of what they're talking about. And I think it's totally attainable, but in 3 years, who knows what the game landscape is going to look like? And I don't think that game
Battle Royale.
I guess what concerns me about that vision of it too is that, what are we looking at then? And Shades of Destiny again is that maybe there's a level you want to play, but you haven't leveled up the hero that is kind of needed to do it. Like, you don't have those fundamental upgrades, and they're pretty fundamental. So they showed some other ones where, like, there was one with Hanzo, where if you shoot a tracer arrow and then hit an enemy that was pinged with a tracer arrow, the arrow will then zip around and tag every enemy that was also pinged with it. Kind of like cool. Yanzu's arrow from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
It's fun. It looks cool, but I can see levels being so difficult that you just can't beat them without a stack of upgrades, which means you kind of have to grind out a bunch of boring PvE boss fights just to level up a character to get the talents you need to be able to make a certain challenge viable. And I don't know that that's fun.
Well,
I mean, people will do it, don't get me wrong.
Like, it's not like there's, just to continue the Destiny comparison, it's not like there's like this open world where you can be like, okay, well, we just did this thing over in this pocket of, the moon, and so let's go do a patrol over here. It's like, are they setting it up like you just load into these like instances where it's like, okay,
that's what it
like,
seems like, yeah.
Choose from menu. This one, it's like
you click on a node, you go into a lobby, and then you play the level. That's what it seems like. Again, this is so early, and to a degree, I kind of question why they were even showing Overwatch 2 at this BlizzCon, because I think it's so early that they don't even have a good formed idea of what the PvE looks like in totality, because they really struggled to communicate it, I think. I mean, they hit some, in the panel at least, they were hitting buzzwords pretty often about how much content there's going to be and how right they're doing by the audience to include all the PvP content, which is true, but it's complicated. So the thing that I'm concerned about is my experience with PvE, both in Overwatch 1 and in the demo that I played, is that it's the mechanic there is not that interesting. In Overwatch 1, there were like, it's an enemy, it's got a shield on it, so you gotta hit it from the side or stun it or knock it down. Okay, that's neat. But it's not necessarily to the extent that like PvE craft could be in something like Destiny, where there's a whole item meta layer to it and you have to gear out for certain things. Or something like, I'm gonna bring this up because I'm a nerd for it, like Doom, where enemies have such a different mechanic about the way they attack and their AI, that when you start combining them in different combinations and in different numbers, a pack of like imps is different than one Cacodemon and one Mancubus, And you have to approach it with different, you have to use different guns, you have to use different strategies. I didn't really ever see that in Overwatch 1, and I definitely didn't see it in the demo for Overwatch 2. That's the kind of thing, though, that kind of problem solving and combat design could make Overwatch 2 PvE content really good, and certainly Blizzard has the development talent to do it. But at this point, I just have to have blind faith that it will become something more interesting than just popping robot heads, which is pretty much all I played. So we'll see. I can see something where like you got to go to the lab and talk with your crew and be like, okay, you'll be this hero, you'll be that hero, you'll be this guy, and here's our like strategy based on the level geometry and the enemies we're fighting. Here's how we're going to try this, and I could see that being a rewarding system. So we'll see. So yeah, I don't know. I can see a vision of it, but the vision is nothing they talked about. It's just me sort of deriving from some of the stuff they talked about. So that's kind of the PvE vision right now, which, I mean, if you're into lore, they promise there'll be lore. If you really like the PvE events, and I did, there's gonna be more of that, but I was hoping, especially since there's a big ass 2 on it, that both of those things would be punched up significantly than what we already saw in Overwatch 1, and it doesn't feel that way yet. So I'm a little middling on it. Overwatch 2 is also bringing a new mode to PvP, which again is coming to Overwatch 1. So to talk about it in terms of 2 is a little weird, but Push. It's a new mode. Hey, essentially, like there's a cute robot, a big stumbly robot who like animates really adorably, and he's got to push this barrier. It's basically a symmetric map, and I think it's kind of like Rainmaker in Splatoon, where there's basically one point that moves back and forth. So if you're standing next to it and you're pushing it into enemy territory, he'll be pushing. That's the name of the mode. Pushing this barricade really slowly. If the enemy team clears you off the robot, then the robot will be like, okay, and then he'll turn around and walk back to the enemy side. And if he's not pushing a barrier, he walks pretty quickly. And then whoever pushes the barrier further into enemy territory wins the match.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's definitely shaking it up a bit. Like
it is actually.
A tug of war.
Because unlike something like Control, where there's a point in the middle,
right,
and around that point most of the fights happen, this means that fights can happen anywhere along the robot path, because the team fights may break out at any point along that path. So I think that does mix up enemy encountering a little bit. It mixes up team fights and the geometry that they take place around, as opposed to just around the point or maybe around spawn if you're really trying to troll hard. Yeah, I think it's kind of like combining the attack and defense phases of Payload into one round. So you're attacking and defending this robot as it's pushing on both sides of the map at the same time.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there are other games that have done modes like this, like Splatoon has a mode like that. It is different because that does kind of mean, like I keep repeating myself, because it worked this way in Splatoon as well. It does mean that like team fights just break out in different places around the map, as opposed to just along this one path in a linear fashion. So,
okay.
Yeah, because when I saw Push, I was like, that's just Payload again, man. But after I saw them walk through it, I was like, okay, there are differences.
So you did not play Push. You saw like a demo of Push?
No, but they did have it playable. Okay. But since that's coming to Overwatch 1, I was more like, well, I want to know what's going on with Overwatch 2 and kind of figure out what the juice is with that.
Yeah. And
I got to be honest, I want to be super clear. I love Overwatch. I think it's a fantastically designed shooter. The art assets are incredible. We were just gushing about like the character design, the music, everything is great about it. More Overwatch, great. I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around the value proposition for 2, spending $60 for it at this point. But I'm based on the way they showed it and the state that it's in, I'm pretty sure we got at least 2 years before that game comes out.
Yeah.
Which makes, I don't know what the games of service environment's going to look like in 2 years. This is kind of the first time where somebody's tried to sell a boxed sequel on top of a games of service game. Destiny like sells Forsaken, and they sell content packs and stuff like that. But this feels a little different because they're adding a different kind of content as opposed to more strikes, a new region, we remodeled the moon kind of thing. So it's interesting to dig into, and hopefully that gave you some information and you're maybe a little less confused about what Overwatch 2 is. And now we can get into our disclaimer portion of it, basically the like, why are we covering it? So again, I don't want to push, pun intended, I guess. I don't want to push my thoughts on it onto anyone else. Where I'm coming from is that if we as an outlet decided to stop covering games publishers that have ties to China, there would be very few games left to cover. Which is not to say that like, we condone what Blizzard did. I personally don't. I think it was a dumb move. But I think their greatest sin was in managing PR, not necessarily the call they made. I'm not trying to excuse them. I just think that if they'd handled it in a less obvious way, people would have gone on with their lives and not known anything. It would have been none the wiser, basically. So while I support you as an individual, if you decide not to buy if you decide not to buy Blizzard products from now on, more power to you. I'm not here to lecture you and tell you that you're, hypocritical for doing that. I just think from our perspective, it's really hard to justify not covering Blizzard products right now as anything other than just kind of like trying to win points with the audience. It just doesn't feel like a unified, doesn't feel like a morally unified way to conduct our business, given that we already cover so many products and companies that work very closely with China, like Nintendo. So that's kind of my rationale about it, and that's why I chose to cover these games and go to go to BlizzCon and play these games. Partially because I know there's an audience who's going to be interested in it, but partially because it was really hard for me to find a reason not to, aside from just joining, the movement, which is fine. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say it's not. I try to cover my bases here, but so yeah, I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that that doesn't in any way convince somebody who was choosing to boycott stuff to not. That's not my intention either. Just trying to explain to you why we as an outlet and a business entity decided to cover it in the way that we have. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have an issue with it, I don't know, yell at me on Twitter. It wouldn't be the first time. So I'll talk about it. I'm open to any of this stuff. But thank you for watching. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any final questions about Overwatch 2? It is confusing.
It's a weird puzzle of a thing that I think it'll take, like you said, it'll take a couple years. It's at least a couple years out, and I think as we get closer to it, we hopefully will piece this together a little bit more, and we'll be on the forefront of trying to relay that to you as a news outlet. I guess kind of like final parting question, you know, if I were somebody watching this video that is an Overwatch fan and still regularly plays it, and these new features interest me, do you think that like anyone would be missing out by just kind of assuming that, you know, they can just keep playing the game that they know and love, and like eventually, you know, maybe, you know, there will be that hook, that Overwatch 2 hook that gets them eventually, if like, to use the Destiny analogy, like maybe the first few packs weren't for you, but you're like, oh, you know what, like Shadowkeep seems like the one that really changes things up enough, and like I'll invest in Destiny 2 like 2 years after launch. Like, do you think that's like there's no one that does like a fan of Overwatch right now like needs to be worried about, right? As far as like don't change my game, you know, like as though 2 will now become the preferred thing, and like people that are still playing 1 kind of get like Destiny 1 player boned, you know?
I mean, to Blizzard's credit, that explicitly will not happen. Everyone who's playing PvP will be on the same playing field. You won't know, aside from they didn't even talk about this, but theoretically, if there are skins and icons and stuff that you can then pull into PvP, that's the only way you'd know if somebody bought 2 or not. You're all gonna have the same heroes, same modes, same maps. So to Blizzard's credit,
the maps will.
Yeah.
So even if you don't buy Overwatch 2, like if they introduce like a new.
All PvP maps.
Wow.
Are gonna be in base Overwatch. Okay. So it truly is PvE content and lore.
Wow. Weird times.
Which can be valuable, but I haven't seen it yet. But there's still plenty of time. So that's kind of where I'm at. I want to see it, because I love Overwatch, and I love the lore, and I love the characters, but I haven't seen it yet. So kind of an initial week showing, but I do think that is owing to the fact that this game is very, very infant right now. I question why they announced it this year. But hey, whatever, man. I'm not going to turn it. I got to play it, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I had fun. I'm not sure that I would want to play it again, but I played it. So yes, thank you for watching. Thank you, Blizzard, for allowing me to attend BlizzCon under media credentials, which I used to go to the media room and play Overwatch 2. And thank you.
Use the gamer pass this time.
somebody tried to stop me, and I just no, gamer. And then also, just side mention, if you got to this point in the video, a little late to mention this, but we have no B-roll. So a lot of us standing here and talking. They didn't release any. All we have is what's publicly available. So we probably used a lot of Overwatch 1 footage, is what I would guess. So thank you for listening to us ramble about it. Hopefully that answered your questions. If it didn't, hit me up in the comments below on Twitter, whatever. And thank you. We'll catch you next time on Inside Gaming Preview.
Even though there was a lot of drama heading into this weekend's BlizzCon, the developer made it clear that it was not backing down from its controversial punishment of a Hearthstone player.
Yeah, interesting. So at the start of the convention, Blizzard President J. Allen Brack, or Jab, gave an emotional apology, or seemingly emotional, I don't know, for Blizzard's response to what he called a tough Hearthstone esports moment.